Hello, everyone. I'm Carrie Sheffman, the head of the women's segment at UBS, and I'm thrilled to be here with Komal Ahmad, who is truly a poster girl for purpose, as well as a very smart businesswoman. So Komal, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
So let's start at the beginning. When you first founded Copia, were you in search of purpose, or did purpose find you?
You know, I always wanted to live a life of meaning. I always wanted to help people. And as the daughter of South Asian immigrant parents, I had 4 very distinct career options laid out for me from an early age, which were doctor, lawyer, engineer, or complete failure. Well, I always wanted to be a Bollywood actress. But as you come to find, I ended up doing something far more realistic, like solving world hunger. And so I wasn't born wanting to solve world hunger. That wasn't the cause, but the desire to help people and maximize my time on earth to give back, that was always part of it. And then, you know, how I even fell into this was just, I was walking down Telegraph Avenue in Berkeley, and I encountered a homeless man who was begging for food. You know, most people beg for money, but he was begging for food. And so that really compelled me to stop and invite him to join me for lunch. And during lunch, he sat across from me, just like you are, wolfing down his food. So he was unbelievably hungry. It wasn't like a ploy for anything else. And then in between bites, he shared a story. He said, "My name is John. I just came back from my 2nd tour in Iraq. I've been waiting weeks for my military benefits to kick in. And because they haven't, you know, I haven't eaten in 3 days." And this really hit home for me. I mean, this is a veteran, you know, someone who would give the most selfless sacrifice for his country, only to come home to face yet another battle, that of hunger. And then adding insult to injury, right across the street, Berkeley's dining hall is throwing away thousands of pounds of perfectly edible food. And so it's this very stark reality of those who have and waste, and those who are in need and starve, and those 2 people right across the street from one another.
And I know you tried to first save food yourself
Yes.
from the Berkeley dining halls.
Yes.
So can you tell us what happened when you tried to do that?
Yeah, so yes, I partnered with our dining hall, and I'm sure we're going to get into liability and why they weren't already donating food. But so I partnered with them, and one day, the dining hall manager calls me and he said, "Hey, Komal, we have 500 sandwiches left over. They need to be picked up in 2 hours. Otherwise, we're going to have to throw them away because we need the fridge space. So do you want them?" I'm like, "Yeah, I want them." He's like, "Great, come get it." Mind you, I'm still sitting in class. And so I grab my bag, I dash across the campus, I jump to a zip car, go through all these one-way streets up to our loading dock, and I begin loading this food into the trunk of my car. And it's perishable food, right? So it's to move as quickly as possible. And so I'm blasting the AC while I finally fill the trunk, and I slam the trunk, and I'm like, "Phew, thank God this is amazing food. Of course there's going to be nonprofits that want it." And so then I proceed to call 30 plus nonprofits in Berkeley, in Oakland, even as far as Richmond. Like, "Hey, I have this amazing food, could use it. Hey, I have 500 gourmet sandwiches that I can deliver to you for free. Do you need them?" A third of them don't answer the phone. A third of them say, "No, we're okay. We don't need any more food today, thanks." And then the last third are like, "Actually, you know what? We could use 10 sandwiches or 15 sandwiches." I'm like, "Great." And I have 485 sandwiches. And I swear I was summoning my inner South Asian grandmother. I'm like, "Hey, you look so skinny. Take this food. Take it, eat it." Just like random people on the street. But it was this frustration that was essentially the birth of my inspiration. You know, I thought how much more effective, how much more efficient this whole process would be if those who have food could say, "Hey, we have food," and those in need of food could say, "Hey, we could use that food." And we match these 2 people, clear the marketplace, and solve a real problem for both of them. So like a Match.com for sandwiches.
Yes, and you've been called the Match.com for reducing food waste.
Yeah.
And so tell us, you know, it sounds like you really realized this was just as much, if not more so, a logistical problem rather than a scarcity problem.
Exactly.
So
Hunger is a logistics problem.
So tell us how the app, Copia, works.
Right. Okay. So imagine you are UBS and you have a corporate event. You launch the Copia app. You tell us quickly how much food you have left over, when do you need it picked up by, and then you post. And this information is then sent to our virtual marketplace, and it kicks in our algorithm. And our algorithm will match this exact amount and type of food to the nearest nonprofit that could use it at that day. that time, that quantity of food. It'll dispatch a driver nearly anywhere in the United States to go pick up this food. And then in on average 26 minutes or less, driver shows up, takes it directly to that nonprofit. The nonprofit confirms receipt of the food. They'll sign this automated, digitized tax deduction receipt so that the business gets to take advantage of the tens of thousands to, over time, millions of dollars in tax savings that are available to them for food that they would have otherwise had to pay to throw away. And then we'll also send back photos and testimonials of the people that you fed. So you get to see the impact you made by spending 2 minutes of your time going Copia.
And I'm sure you had to overcome the common misconception about the liability of donating food. So how did you do that?
Yeah, I remember when I first marched up to our dining hall managers and I asked them, what do you do with your excess food? They said, well, we try not to have any. And I was like, well, how often does that work out for you? And after pushing and prodding, they admitted that they do have waste, but they have to throw it away. And I said, well, why would you throw it away when you could go right across the street to People in People's Park and donate it? They said, because of liability, we don't do that. And I was like, yeah, homeless people's high-powered attorneys are standing by just to sue you. Like, John the veteran can't afford a hamburger, but somehow he can afford a litigator. And so I did my own research. I was clearly not going to accept this answer, so I did my own research, and I discovered that in 1996, Congress passed what is called the Bill Emerson Good Samaritan Act. And it protects all donors, regardless of whether you're a corporation, organization, or individual, from any liability. And get this, in the last 26 years, the number of lawsuits or legal claims that have been filed against any business or individual has been 0.
Wow.
But everybody and their mother has like a second cousin, twice removed's uncle's hotel that shut down because they donated food. When in fact, that's not true.
And Paula referenced in her opening remarks this concept of philanthrocapitalism, doing well and while also doing good for society. And you've really mastered that with Copia. And many, many businesses that we're all familiar with, Bloomberg, the Cheesecake Factory, the professional baseball team, the Arizona Cardinals, have partnered with Copia. So can you tell us, and you alluded a little bit to it before, but what are some of the benefits and how do you work with these companies?
Yeah, so there's a few benefits just in the process of just donating. One is that it is a safe, so we provide $5 million insurance policy that protects the food from the time of pickup to the time of drop off. The nonprofits that we work with, the 8,000 plus nonprofits we work with, sign hold harmless indemnity agreements, which directly indemnify our food donor, the food business, as well as us from any liability. It puts the onus of accepting, rejecting, distributing the food onto the nonprofit. Then you have the Good Samaritan Act, both on a state and federal level. And so that's just like high level protection. Then from an environmental perspective, we're giving you like a dashboard that will allow you to easily see what's your methane offset, how much water did you conserve, how much food was recovered, how many people did you feed, and where did this food go? We're also helping them tell that story. Their food is too good to be wasted, right? UBS's food is too good to be wasted. And that's why you've committed to feeding people and not landfills.
Yeah.
And then the tax deduction. So Congress updated the tax law. It used to be that only C Corps could get enhanced tax deductions for food donations. Now it's S Corps and LLCs. It used to be that you could only write off 10% of your net income. Now it's up to 25 of what that delta is specifically for food donations. And so it makes financial sense to do the right thing. And let's say you're not profitable, you can carry it forward for 5 additional years. So it makes sense to do the right thing.
It absolutely makes sense, and it's amazing to see what you've built over the last 6 years since you founded Copia. And so tell us, you've rescued food from events like the Academy Awards, the Super Bowl. How did you scale so successfully?
Well, I had an incredible team, pound by pound. We recovered food, and we really figured out also where is the most food coming from. So we partnered with larger organizations, so corporations that have multiple locations or corporate dining halls, Compass Group, Sodexo, things that will help us scale as quickly as possible. In regards to the Super Bowl, where we recovered 14 tons of food,
wow.
And 14 tons is like 4 16-foot refrigerated trucks filled from top to bottom, not with popcorn or hot dogs, but filet mignon, lobster rolls, $300 cheeses, pulled pork sandwiches. Like, Enchiladas, not my jam, but it's incredible food for the 23,000 people that we fed that weekend.
Wow.
You know, and as I said, for when Copia went to Hollywood, we partnered with Women in Film, Vanity Fair, Slumdog Millionaire superstar Frida Pinto, who I actually have Tina Brown to thank because she got that information from Tina Brown. She saw me at the Toyota Mother of Invention Award, and so she was like, I went to the Golden Globes and I saw so much food being wasted, and I wanted to do something. So I was wondering, she calls me, I was wondering if you'd want to partner together to launch this in LA for the Oscars. So we had like less than 3 weeks to do it, and you know, we pulled it off. We had to get refrigerated trucks. You have to find an abundance of nonprofits that can accept food at varying times of the day and night. And then, thanks to all of our donors, over 1,100 people got to, for the first time, eat like a star.
That's really amazing, and thank you to Tina. I know she's in the green room watching us right now. And talk about over the last 2 years, you founded Copia 6 years ago, 2 of which were the pandemic. How did you pivot, like so many of us, so many businesses had to pivot and really adapt to the pandemic environment? And then also, I understand you also expanded during that time to also focus on disaster relief as well.
Yeah, yes. So, during COVID, we're really a B2B business, right? A business gives us a lot of food, and then we take it directly to a nonprofit that will accept it. But food sources came to a screeching halt where hunger increased by over 40%. So we had to think about how do we get more food into the system? And so what we did is we retrofitted our technology to essentially create the technical infrastructure necessary to create the first emergency meal response platform. And so what it did is we partnered with restaurants. We helped them mobilize their workers, to create these meals. So we raised philanthropic funding to actually help them kickstart their kitchens. And they were the ones who were creating meals in the tens of thousands in amount. And that was then being redistributed directly to people's homes, which was very different because people weren't really going to these nonprofits. So we worked with nonprofits to figure out, well, who are the people who are most in need? Triple threat individuals, people who don't have WIC, don't have SNAP, don't have Grubhub, people who are immunocompromised, people living below the poverty line, and essentially they're shut-ins. And I don't like using this word, but if it weren't for Copia, they would starve. So we had to think about, okay, how do you get this from B to B, from B to C to C to C? And so it was retrofitting our technical infrastructure that would allow volunteers to be the food heroes. The way, I guess it would be helpful to also explain, the way that we handle logistics now is, when I first started off, I was hiring my own drivers, retaining them, emotionally supporting them. It's a very costly process, one that I do not recommend for any early stage startup. And the thinking was, why do we have to create Uber while we create Copia? Why not piggyback off of this pre-existing logistics infrastructure that exists not only all over the country, but in fact, all over the world? And so that's what we've done. We've done a webhook integration with Uber and DoorDash that allows our customers, when they request a pickup of their excess food, it hits their API, which hits our API, which will then dispatch a driver nearly anywhere in the country. And so that's allowed us to become geographically agnostic, to answer your scale question. So now we operate in over 270 plus cities.
Wow.
And growing.
It's amazing to think, all of the DoorDashers, the Uber Eats drivers driving all over the cities across the country.
So with COVID, so that's how our B2B model works, right? We're using paid driver model. With when you are not generating income from any of the food businesses and we still need to feed people, we had to figure out, well, how are we going to get food into the system? How are we going to get drivers routed? Because we can't use the paid driver model. And so when we first started off, like I said, we were hiring our own drivers. So we created our own Copia Drive platform, which we then, that had been sunsetted, that we then relaunched so that volunteers could sign up and get directly directions from where they need to pick up the food to all of the different houses they needed to go to. What's the most efficient routing? It allowed restaurants to also tell us when they're ready for pickup, when they have, whatever the food they have. that's prepared and ready to go. And so, through this model, we were able to provide over 1.6 million meals in 3 cities. Most of the time, I think it's about feeding as many people as possible. That's what success is. But that experience showed me that, it's not always about feeding the most people. It's also about feeding the people who are most in need. And that was kind of the shift that we did during COVID.
Absolutely, and even beyond the impact of solving hunger, there's also a tremendous environmental impact as well. And I'd love for you to share with us a little bit more about that, because I don't know if everyone fully realizes the tremendous carbon footprint of food waste.
Yeah, so if food waste were a country, it would be the 3rd largest emitter of methane after the US and China. Wow. And if you could wrap your head around how much food waste is actually occurring, if you imagine the world's largest football stadium filled to its absolute brim, not with last night's pad thai or this morning's caffeine croissant, but untouched, unopened, perfectly edible food. That's how much food goes wasted every single day. And meanwhile, 1 in 4 don't know where their next meal is coming from. So clearly, it's not a lack of food that's the issue, right? It's an inequitable distribution of that food. So hunger is not a scarcity problem, it's a logistics problem. And so far, I'm very proud to share that Copia has diverted over 5 million pounds of food from landfill. We're gonna feed 6 million people this year with food that would have otherwise been wasted. And we're still just in early days.
That's incredible. Your story is incredible, and yes. And before we wrap up, you've solved, as you say, the world's dumbest problem, solving hunger. What is next for you, for Copia, and how do you still feel inspired to continue with this purpose-driven work?
Yeah, so I guess what's next for me is, with Copia, we were able to master the redistribution of the most perishable resource, which is food, right? Nothing goes bad faster than food. And so the thinking is, now that we have this logistics infrastructure, now that we have these match.algorithms, we can, match.com/algorithms, we can now retrofit this technology to help redistribute medicine, medical supplies, books, clothing, vaccines, anything. Because it's not a lack of any of these resources, it's just an ineffective distribution of those resources. So the future of the next company I want to build is to create the world's most effective, the world's most intelligent platform for the redistribution of surplus resources, starting with the hardest one first.
Wow. Well, Komal, I'm beyond impressed. I think I can speak for the audience when I say that we're all tremendously impressed and can't wait to watch what you do next. So
thank you
for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks so much.